In order to test our endpoints, we'll need to be able to interact with our Express server from our test files. So all of our endpoints have been added to our Express instance, which is this app object here. So if we export this instance, then we can import it into our tests. So at the bottom of our server file, let's go module.exports equals app, like that. Now our Express instance is actually a module. So coming over to our item test file, let's delete this demo test that we put in before. And instead we're going to import our Express app module. So we'll go const app equals require, and then we'll need to go back 3 directories to get back to the root, and then we can go server, like that. Now we will very often create multiple unit tests for the same feature in order to test different aspects of that feature. For example, we want to test what's called the happy path if things go right, and we also want to test the sad path when an error is thrown. Now we can group related tests inside a describe block. Now describe doesn't actually change the functionality of any of its included tests, but it means that the code as well as the console output will be more logically grouped. So in each of our API test files, we'll be grouping our tests based on the endpoint that we're testing. So let's create our first describe block, and this one will be for the post items endpoint. Now the second argument to describe, just like with it, is a function. And that's simply just going to include the test cases that we want to run. So our first test case for this endpoint will test if a new item is created when the proper data is provided. So in a moment we'll create a JSON payload and test that the API returns a success message when we send it. So to begin with, let's call it, and the description of this test will be should create a new item. Now this is going to be an async test since we need to wait until the database call is complete before returning a value. Alright, let's just put in a dummy assertion for now, just so we can ensure that this test suite is working. So we'll go expect true to be true. So you'll notice that I've got my server running in another tab, and if I try to now run this test suite while my server is running, you'll see that we will get an error. And that error is uncaught error, blah blah, address in use essentially. Now you're often going to want to run your tests while your server is running in development. And the reason we get this error is because the test suite is creating a second instance of the Express server, and it's also trying to bind to that same 8070 port. Now in fact, the test suite doesn't actually need the server to bind to any port at all. We'll see in a moment how we can directly trigger our endpoints in our tests without the Node web server running at all. So for this reason, let's go back to our server module here, and we want to wrap this part of the code here is where we actually bind to a port and listen on that port. Let's actually wrap that in a conditional. So how we're going to do it is we're going to go if process.env, and the variable is going to be node_env. We're going to say if that doesn't equal test, then we want the app to start listening. Now what we need to do is go to our script, our test script here, and we need to set the environment variable node_env to equal test, like that. So now when you run the test suite via the command line, that environment variable is going to be set to test, and that means that the condition here will fail and the the listen call here will be skipped. Now, how we've set this environment variable is not actually compatible with every system though. I believe Windows has a different syntax for setting environment variables on the command line, for example. So to make this work universally, we're going to use the crossenv package. So let's install that by going npm install, and we'll save this as a development dependency. And it'll be crossenv with a hyphen. With that now installed, we can go and update our test script here, and we can make the environment variable an argument of crossenv. And this will ensure that the command will now work universally. If we run our test now, you'll see that everything seems to work. However, what you will notice is that after the test's complete, the process doesn't actually end. You have to manually kill that with a Control-C like that. Now that's something that we didn't have to do before. And the reason for this is because by default, Mocha will not kill the server itself. And remember that we're now loading in our Express server up here. So what we're going to need to do is add an exit flag to our script here. So we can just go, it's a little hard to see, but we can go ---- exit on the end of our script. And now when we run it, Mocha will automatically exit once the last test is finished.